Stride on PSVR1 was a pretty great, albeit simple parkour action game. The developers dropped it on the PlayStation Store for $15, and then soon after, raised the price to $20, making us all think that the much talked about multiplayer modes and story campaign were all coming in future updates. But developer JoyWay not only abandoned the PSVR1 version pretty much at launch, the campaign ended up getting spun out into its own separate game called Stride Fates, which hits PSVR2 this week.
Gun, you scum! I don't care. I've always dreamed of being like the action movie hero. From the south.
Whereas the original Stride was more of an arcade experience, Stride Fates attempts to deliver a full-fledged VR game, adding a story, weapon upgrades, and some more diverse levels to the parkour action. And at least at first, everything seems like it's on the right track. You're given the option to make jumping and reloading easy, the parkour seems great, you can walk, run, jump, slide, wall run, and grapple, all of which feels really good to do during the beginning stages of the game. I get that swinging your arms to switch from walking to running won't be everyone's cup of tea, but I enjoyed it. Though, strangely, the run speed does feel a little bit on the slow side. And each stage plays out pretty much the same. You choose your mission from the map, and then you're tasked with getting through each level by finding keys, killing a bunch of clones that, as expected, look identical, and jumping and climbing to the ever-present little yellow waypoint. And as you progress, you'll unlock a couple of weapons, each with a ton of upgrades that you can access by collecting resources throughout the levels.
Here again, Strider!
But if you've already fast-forwarded to the end of the video to take a look at the score, and now you're back to see what the problems are, well, the list is pretty long, so let's start with the obvious. While everything runs at a native 90 FPS, and the environments themselves look pretty good, sporting the same Mirror's Edge style stark white buildings of the original game, everything has a shimmer to it due to the lack of anti-aliasing. There's no DFR used here, so there's plenty of room for improvement if JoyWay chooses to deliver on the updates. Now look, I don't expect every VR game to look perfect graphically, and considering the variety of environments and the sprawling vistas of the outdoor stages, I think Stride Fates looks perfectly acceptable. Alright, sorry for the abrupt edit here, but I should say that it was perfectly acceptable. The day before launch, JoyWay added anti-aliasing, which, in my opinion anyway, makes things look so much worse. There's still a shimmer to everything, and now there's this last-gen blur to go along with it. What's less acceptable is how boring the AI is. On the default difficulty, the enemies are insanely easy to take down and never present any problem. And strangely, they're constantly claiming that you're out of ammo when you're not. This would be way less of an issue, but a few stages lock you into small areas and evolve into the longest, most boring wave shooters I've ever experienced in VR. Hand-to-hand combat is pointless and doesn't feel good.
Only way.
You can't just reach the cable.
Maybe you can stand on something?
Enemies spawn out of literally nowhere, and the repetitive action goes on so long that sometimes you think you've missed an objective or that you're doing something wrong. What's worse is that some of these levels can't even be completed because the game will just crash on you. This happens on multiple stages, so hopefully it can be fixed soon. Sorry, another abrupt edit here. This was thankfully fixed. I'm only leaving this in the review because my video is running a little bit late, so I'm sure there's other videos out there already talking about the crashes, and I didn't want you to think that I was ignoring them. They were a problem, now they're not. There's plenty of control issues to mention here too, starting with grabbing items, which just isn't as easy as it should be, mostly because the game wants you to use the grapple mechanic to teleport them to you. So if you're too close, you'll end up grabbing onto a nearby ledge or table, and if you're too far, you'll find yourself frequently grabbing the wrong item, which is especially frustrating when you're in the middle of a gunfight. Plus, the further you get into the game, you'll find that simply moving through the levels can be a pain. Wall runs feel good when you intend to do them, but it's way too easy to initiate one and send you running to your doom. And climbing straight up sucks. Your hands will twist and turn while shimming across a ledge, instilling zero faith that you have a firm grasp on anything. And there's so much climbing in some of these stages that it's almost shocking. Oh, and we need to talk about the bugs. I've gotten stuck in the floor and had to restart more times than I can count. Invisible walls are everywhere, and sometimes shit just doesn't work the way it's supposed to. It's maddening, and it makes Stride feel incomplete. My biggest complaint though has to be that Stride Fates completely forgets what made Stride a fun game. The non-stop, frantic, action-packed parkour. In the first game you use all of your skills just to get from point A to point B, You'd be running and jumping and grappling and sliding under lasers and pulling out your gun and shooting an enemy as you jump past him in slow motion, as you crash through a window just to jump to another ledge, as the world is collapsing behind you. But in Fates, everything feels so relaxed and casual. There's never a sense of urgency to do anything, and the parkour stuff just seems like something you can do, but you're never forced to get good at. Even when you take Stride out of the equation and look at the game that we got, rather than the game that we expected or hoped for, it still falls flat on so many levels. And when Stride Fates decides to focus on its story and arbitrarily takes away your ability to jump or use weapons, well, this is when the game is at its worst. And this happens a lot. So instead of participating in great action sequences, you're left completely powerless, solving puzzle after puzzle after puzzle. But hey, at least I still get to stab a bunch of dudes in the butt. Full disclosure, after experiencing way too many bugs, having to reload my game numerous times, playing through 3 separate wave shooter levels, and being completely baffled by some of Stride Fate's poor level design, I eventually got so frustrated and fed up that I stopped playing after about 5 hours. Meaning, I still haven't seen the back half of the game. This is something I almost never do when reviewing a game, but let's be fair. If the first 5 hours of the game irritated me this much, there's no way I'm going to be able to recommend it to anybody. And that's a shame, because the opening moments are promising. But Stride Fates needs so much more than just polish. It needs a complete redesign.
Pilot mode